The Loma Prieta earthquake struck the San Francisco Bay Area at 5:04 p.m. on October 17, 1989. The Richter magnitude was 7.1, making it the most powerful earthquake to occur in the Bay Area since the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. Damage exceeded $6 billion. 62 people lost their lives as a result of the quake. The earthquake was located a few miles west of Loma Prieta Mountain on the Santa Cruz Mountain segment of the San Andreas Fault. The hypocenter occurred at a depth of 11.5 miles below the Earth's surface. The seaside city of Santa Cruz was the nearest sizable city to the quake's epicenter, located 9 miles to the northwest. Heavy damage and several deaths occurred here. Damage was also extensive in the numerous cities along Monterey Bay and in the Santa Cruz Mountains. This program documents the Loma Prieta earthquake and its aftermath. Most of the footage was filmed within minutes to a few weeks of the quake.
We gotta start feeding some, okay?
Lawrence. Hope everybody I know is. I hope you're still standing. Stubbs will get you guys done.
But there were 2 key plays early in that one as well.
You can see power lines are swaying.
What a shot. You're here already.
The earthquake hit at 5 after 5. The epicenter, I'm being told now, was in Hollister. Major damage.
We ask that you hold on to your tickets as rain checks will be honored. As you leave the stadium in an orderly fashion, we ask that you turn your radios on.
We're getting so many reports of so much damage in every direction that we're giving you what we have as we get it. Yes, we did. As we drove in the car, as I said, it first of all felt like a very bad blowout, a flat tire. And then all 3 of us in the vehicle noticed that there were pieces, crumblings coming from the top of the bridge. And one man described it as being in the twilight zone and just not having any sense of reality. It was all so bizarre, all so frightening and scary.
There it is, Gary, there it is.
you. I just got the monitor back. Okay, we have pictures on the air now. We have pictures of a fire in Berkeley. I'm told the location is Berkeley. This is an aerial view, a live picture of, it looks like more than one fire in Berkeley right now. We don't know exactly what the location is or how bad the fire is or whether any people's lives are in jeopardy. But there you have it. That is the Cypress section of the Nimitz Freeway. And you can see, oh my God, look at that. The freeway has just completely collapsed. And it looks as though there are vehicles down there. The traffic, of course, is completely stopped. Oh, that's pretty frightening. I certainly hope that nobody was injured in that, but that's just one of the scariest things I've ever seen. We had no monitors. We had no way of knowing if we were even on the air, certainly in here. And so I was the closest here, so I sat down. Ana Chavez had not come in. I was sitting in this chair. My co-anchor, Don Sanchez, started running out the door to go and find out what the damage was around here. Ana Chavez was on her way to work, so she wasn't in the building, and Pete Wilson was out at the game, so I was the only anchor in the building.
In that building.
Show! Go home! We've had serious problems, obviously. Go home and secure your residence. Shut off the gas, shut off electricity, store water, prepare for aftershocks, prepare for 3 days of no services. You got 90 minutes of light left. You better make use of your time. Standing here ain't doing nothing.
Okay, why does this area seem to be hit the hardest?
My understanding would be the landfill in this, because the underground is of sand and landfill. It's very loose. We have older structures that are 2, 3, and 4 stories, some even 5. Thus, they are old buildings, haven't been restructured for earthquake proofing, and then we had a major earthquake, I believe, over 6, and this is the result of this. We have a lot of down buildings.
No, I was just, is
he okay?
Yes, I'm okay. I'm okay.
Yeah, how did you get out?
By the window.
You climbed out the fire escape?
No, I did. People climbed for me and they brought me down. I couldn't do it myself. I was shaken.
Just make sure. And you're okay?
I'm okay.
You okay?
I want to say the young people were just wonderful, how they helped us. People we never knew and they never knew us, but they carried us in their arms down the stairs, and they didn't leave us one minute. And even now some young folks that are very, very kind are helping us to find a shelter. We can't thank them enough. But we lost everything, and all our places in shambles, and our bodies are probably dead, and we lost everything.
Are these the young people who helped you here too? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Good luck.
Pete, this town of 40,000 is about 10 miles from the epicenter of the earthquake. You would expect the damage to be severe here, and it is. The downtown section of Santa Cruz is basically gone. All the old brick, unreinforced buildings have collapsed. This is a department store called Ford's. It collapsed. The second story came down into the first floor, trapping several people inside. At least 3 people are known to have died here on the mall, perhaps 12 to 14 total in Santa Cruz. Authorities do not have a final fatality figure. Many, many other people are injured. Okay, Michael, tell me what happened.
Well, I just was walking home. I was going off to a Chinese restaurant to get something to eat. Started shaking real bad, so I stepped in the middle of the street, and I was down at the other end of the mall, Ford's department store, and the windows blew out, and I heard the ceiling come in, and that's right away. I just went up the mall and realized pretty much the whole mall had come down, and there was a woman screaming inside the Ford's department store. About 10 of us jumped in right away. Since then, we've been up and down the mall trying to find anybody else.
On Tuesday at 5:04, those of us who were still here, we lost the power, but we realized we had a major seismic experiment on our hands. And so we took advantage of the evening essentially to just plan what we were going to do the next day, since we realized we weren't going to be able to do a lot that night. And so we divided into teams focusing on our different areas of expertise: geology, engineering, and seismology. As far as the geologists went, the first few days were kind of chaotic because they went to the map traces of the San Andreas, been mapped by Andre Sarna over a decade ago, and didn't find clear-cut tectonic rupture. And so we were concerned that maybe it was another fault, for example, the Sargent Fault or the Ziani, although the seismicity sure looked like it was the San Andreas. We still had to cover our bases, so by noon of the 18th, we had established that we didn't have a clear break on the San Andreas.
Anyway, it's a little bridge.
A culvert goes under?
Yeah, and the ground on either side.
It's settled back. Maybe that's fine. I'm trying to learn sitting at touch from the other.
So we could link up with you to go through the
Okay. So you could probably see it.
Yes, you can.
So
it's right here.
Right here somewhere, right? Okay.
First thing we did was we were looking for a surface rupture. And we figured with an earthquake of that high in magnitude, it was preliminary 6.9, that we probably had a surface rupture on the San Andreas. So we split into 3 teams. We met here the night of the earthquake, figured out who was going to go where, and then the next morning at daybreak, Carol Prentice and I were at the north end. We went up Highway 17.
And spent a day or two out riding around. People were looking for the big fault scarp, the big break, the place where the main rupture hit the surface. And the ground was offset by a yard, and didn't find it. No one found it.
We went whistling down Summit Road and checked a number of things. We saw the half-meter of left lateral offset on Morrell Road, but again figured it was a slope failure phenomenon. We hadn't yet seen the right lateral stuff that we were looking for and eager to find. So we just kept working southeast, crisscrossing the fault zone and not finding definitive right lateral breaks, but we were finding a lot of left lateral stuff, all of which is reasonably ascribed to some form of slope failure. We were running right down a ridge top, and it was obviously, everything was cracked up, and a lot of stuff had to be sliding off that ridge, and all of this left lateral we saw, we felt could be ascribed to that. We missed the big crack at the Tranbarger house, because when we hit Summit Road, we were about a kilometer or so from Highway 17. We turned southeast on Summit Road, because going up Old Santa Cruz Highway, we hadn't seen anything, so we didn't figure there was anything behind us. And there were two big cracks behind us that we didn't discover. We found out about on television that night.
Okay. For being very much on time. But they say now.
We have always had camera crews that take their gear home with them for just such an eventuality. If an earthquake hits, or if there's a major flood, or something happens in an area that's totally unplanned and requires immediate response, the crew doesn't have to drive in here, pick up gear, and then drive back. 2 minutes after the earthquake, nobody knew what had happened. 10 minutes after the earthquake, lots of people knew little bits. An hour after the earthquake, a few people knew a fair amount, but nobody really had a whole picture. And part of what we were doing was simply trying to gather information and give it to as many people as we could.
I think that in a sense, we were the conduits for not only people learning that, but the experts who had to go out later and kind of followed our trail. And this big crack is here, looks really dramatic, but it also tells people where it is, who can then come find out why.
We got about 2 feet here. 18 inches again.
So how did you recognize it before?
Oh, just from aerial photos. This looks more like a left lateral.
Yeah, if you put this back together. Yeah, okay.
Which would make the...
Everything's been pretty well recon, and I don't think nobody's seen anything obvious.
The other thing would be these roads in here. Someone's on the valley bottom, so maybe you don't have problems with ridge crest collapse. And where you're off the main highway, so it hasn't been patched yet. You could go out and measure offsets in the pavement.
If this were a landslide, just due to gravity, then we'd expect that side to go down because there's a big steep slope on that side. And right now, my working hypothesis is that this may be a tension gash caused by a large stress field that is imposed on this entire block in through here. I think what we've got is a shear couple that is deforming a fairly large body of rock in here, and that these are tension fractures that are forming where this block is exposed to a shear couple.
Can you give it a break for a couple minutes? We're about to go on live for the live report. If you want to get back down in a few minutes.
I just want one picture. Hurry, James. Well, John was thrown in the opposite direction. Now, here we were standing just about like we are right now. And he was thrown to his right, and I was thrown to my left. So.
You ended up on the floor.
Oh, yeah.
Each time.
Yeah. When the quake hit, I was up at the store.
Yeah.
And I watched, I was at the store parking lot. Right. It was my normal after-work hangout, right? Uh-huh. And I was sitting there, talking to a friend of mine, and all of a sudden we saw the earth crack, and it came from that way, and we watched it crack this way. And it cracked right to the store.
You mean the store down here?
Summit store. And the trucks and everything that were parked on the edge of the road started, mine didn't because I had my emergency brake on, and it's a real heavy utility truck. But my Paulie's truck started going. We held it, and it moved 3 feet.
There was no indication of a shake. It was just the initial boom, and everything went.
It needs to be up there. Leaning against the house.
A mirror fell over, the speakers fell over, the record fell over, and it cracked. The piano went back. I ran over. The light thing came down and scraped me on the arm. I was on the sidewalk standing, and my baby brother's stroller started rolling away from my mom. So she was holding on to the fence, and I was holding on to the fence, and my mom was also holding on to my baby brother's stroller.
If I had the money, I'd just pack up and leave. Heck with it. Too much trouble now. Especially after all the reports, you know, they say that there's going to be another one, a worse one.
And just about, I'd say 8 seconds or about halfway through it, I looked down there, and I was trying to get a grip on what was going on, trying to get some grab onto something that was solid. And as I did, I looked down at it, and the crack just suddenly opened up. And it just was so quick, it was just like a rifle shot. It just, boom, it was open. And it opened up pretty wide, almost 3 feet. And then it closed up. And it all happened so fast. I mean, it takes longer to explain it, but it happened so fast. The crack opened up about 3 feet, and a lot of my tools and everything else they all bounced right into it. It's like everything was headed right towards that crack. The center vibration was pushed all towards that crack. And then it shut back up. It shut back to about 1.5 to 2 foot.
Ever we come to a crack when I'm riding on the road, there's a crack on the road where it's split. He'll stop and look at it and be real cautious. He just did it up on the road when we were coming down. Just that way, he was acting weird. I went riding a couple days after, and he was really bad. He was really spooky at everything and jumpy and nervous and everything. Yeah. But I think he's a lot calmer now. Just those little cracks in the road he doesn't like.
Oh, that's interesting. And does this one do it too?
Yeah, he's always like that, though. He likes your camera.
Northern half of the cypress structure is underlain by bay mud, and we have seen records that were deployed for instruments deployed after the earthquake that show that the northern area shook harder than the southern area, so that there may be a contribution from this ground amplification to the failure of the cypress structure, although the failure itself seems to be very clearly a design failure in the bridge.
87, contact data park. 87, good day. United 178, heavy clear for takeoff in the 1 right. Clear to go 1 right, United 178, heavy.
After the earthquake, San Francisco International Airport was closed for 13 hours, which is the longest period that's ever been closed in the history of the airport here. We sustained a lot of damage in our north terminal, as well as our control tower. Basically, operations had been suspended primarily due to the control tower, because communication is so crucial between the planes and the tower. We had 75% of the terminal space operable. I mean, there had been a lot of damage in the north terminal due to a lot of leakage in the ceiling, due to lighting fixtures coming down, the monitor units, the display units for your arrival and departure flights, they came to the ground. No damage to the runway. Airfield side it held up really well. Believe it or not, it's on Bayfield, just like the marina and everything else, and there was no damage.
One of the common effects that we observe after a major earthquake, such as the one we just had on October 17th, is a secondary effect of ground shaking called liquefaction. This takes several forms. The good news is that when liquefaction occurs, rarely are people killed in result of it. But the bad news is that much of the damage that occurs to structures in earthquakes commonly is ascribable to liquefaction.
Just some rolling
I heard the school principal on the way down here on KRON saying they were going to open tomorrow.
Just came from a press conference that Alan Hall just covered. Okay, any other editorial points?
Good evening once again from the streets of San Francisco. It is so unusual to be in this festive city, essentially in the dark of night.
This right here is the front porch. There is the house down the hill. Or what's left of it, shall we say.
The paper said that the whole, seismographic, where the big one was a minute, but I would say it was closer to 5. From the time that it hit, from the time that it actually, where I could, feel safe enough to get up and find my way down the stairs and then gather my dogs and then get under the dining room table, because it shook a long time and it just kept coming. And it kept coming and it kept coming again. And I didn't know if maybe it wasn't going to even be bigger. But I hit the ground, and I've still got a bad rug burn on my elbow to prove it, and a bruised shoulder, and grabbed my chair and put it over my head. And it was like riding a roller coaster. It was just kind of like this. It was just a real rocking and rolling and like this. It was really a rocking and rolling. And I looked down and methodically and picking up pieces of glass out of my leg, and I didn't have any shoes on. But then when I actually saw what had happened, I just, in my wildest imagination, had no comprehension that Mother Nature could be that destructive in just,
It looks as though the main zone of breakage that occurred during the earthquake stretched about 50 kilometers through the Santa Cruz Mountains, virtually entirely in Santa Cruz County, which runs from about Pajaro Gap up to Highway 17. The zone looks like it begins at depth really beneath the Zayani Fault. In fact, the official USGS epicenter is located almost directly beneath the Zayani Fault, and that zone, dipping roughly 70 degrees, appears to surface at about the summit along the San Andreas. So what we've seen, it looks like, is most of the major rupture being concentrated directly under Santa Cruz County. What we saw happen on some of these ridge tops where the shaking was the most severe, in fact, this is where we've seen these large cracks and fractures that have opened up. There are older homes in those locations that failed, but there are also new homes that were built and presumably inspected according to the UBC that simply did not survive for a variety of reasons, some of which relate to the tie between the structure and the foundation. So in some cases the mud sill actually was ripped off the foundation bolts. The cities are further from the fault, the Santa Cruz City being perhaps maybe 10 to 15 miles from the Zayani at the San Andreas, Watsonville being a bit closer in the South County. And it looks like those were the areas, in fact, along with Aptos and Soquel, which are a bit closer, that seem to receive most of the damage. Because they are dominantly built on older alluvial plain or alluvial sediments with high water tables, they shook violently. In fact, that's why we lost most of those older buildings. It's interesting, if you go back and read the account from 1906, that the failure is almost identical. The kinds of effects, even though the 1906 event was larger because it was further away, my sense is from those 06 accounts that the shaking was very, very similar in Santa Cruz County. In fact, if anything, I think this earthquake affected Santa Cruz downtown area more severely, and I think it's again because the buildings were now 83 years older. The buildings that didn't fail in 06 that survived, many of them came down in this earthquake.
classic case of punching right through. And one can only speculate that it happened at a time when the Earth was all moving downwards, and then its motion arrested. The slab with a lot of inertia, the roadway slab with a lot of inertia, just wants to keep on going.
We're working with Pajaro Rescue Mission and Assumption Church of Pajaro and Fort Ord Army MedTechs. That's the MedTechs you see over here. We're all working for a week we're averaging 6 to 8 weeks to be here. That's our goal here, to help.
And you're all volunteers?
We're all volunteers. This is the biggest facility in Santa Cruz and Monterey counties to house what we're doing here. We're the only practically facility here. We have tons and tons of water still here, drinkable water they're taking. And it's food. We're about 400 a day, food baskets, and another clothing too. Clothing's given out here as well, and hygiene products. We have 10 cities all throughout. The homes have been condemned. We have approximately 7,000 in Watsonville. The homes have been crushed. Foundations are gone. That's only Watsonville alone. That's not including Aromos, Las Lomas, Castroville, Moss Landing, where destruction has hit.
Nos echó fuera con la policía. Nos tuvimos que salir y dormimos 5 noches en los carros allá afuera de nuestras casas ahí, hasta que la capitana del Salvation Army nos trajo para acá el domingo.
Porque no podemos regresar a la casa. Quedó mal y el dueño dijo nomás, él arregló con decir ya busquen otra como si fuera muy fácil.
This shelter happens to be basically outdoors. It's the only one in Watsonville that is run by the Red Cross. And it went basically from earthquake, and then Mother Nature hit them immediately with pouring down rain. So it was get the shelters up, get them inside, get them warm, provide adequate clothing and housing and food, and that's what we did.
The landslides along Highway 17, a lot of that had to do with the fact that the slopes were over-steep, and these were the previously cut slopes that just failed. Another thing we found, though, in that region, both on 17 and on some of the other roads, there seemed to be some kind of an amplification of the earthquake energy at the noses of ridges. We would find places where the road goes around the nose of a ridge. We would find a fracture in the road on one side of the nose. You go around the nose of the ridge and there'd be a fracture on the other side, and maybe a small rock fall in each place. We noted these things, and then when we went back for more detailed investigation, we could look and follow the cracks from the road up the ridge, and the cracks would go up around the nose of the ridge and connect and come down the other side, so that the entire nose of the ridge has been displaced by some amount. And this was something we noticed in many places. The landslide activity was quite pronounced along the coastal bluffs, and clearly there had been a lot of major failures of the coastal bluffs, and we could tell from what we saw that there were probably a lot of minor failures as well, and we need to get out and do some reconnaissance on that. The second thing we found was that in the core of the Santa Cruz Mountains in the epicentral region, there were a lot of major displacements that are very definitely landslides. There was some apparent reactivation of older slides, and there was a formation of new ones. Since the earthquake and since the rain that followed the earthquake, some of these have continued to move, and we've seen incremental movement in the weeks following the earthquake. And every time we return to visit some of these sites, the cracks have opened up more, the feature has become more pronounced, and apparently some of these features are at a factor of safety of about 1, and any anything like aftershocks or additional rainfall and accumulation of groundwater is going to continue to mobilize them for the future.
Los Gatos was one of the towns fairly near the epicenter of the earthquake. No town was really near it, but it was one of the developed areas fairly near the epicenter. And there are the houses, beautiful Victorian houses, old brick houses, newer houses, sort of all different kinds of buildings, and many of them had been damaged and partly collapsed or brick walls leaning. So the damage was impressive. But just about as soon as we hopped out of the car, we saw these incredible tent structures, they're called casually. But anyway, places where the sidewalks have been buckled up, have instead of laying flat, have buckled up making a tent. So both the thrust faulting and the folding in the young rocks are all suggesting that in recent geologic times, that ground has been shortened in the same way and in the same sense that the sidewalks in Los Gatos are reflecting a shortening. It's surprising to see anything so active and happening right in front of your face. But if you're a real geologist and realize that what happens now is simply another page on a longer story, the longer story is telling us the same things.
This is a seismometer. It's made by Mark Products, and it's a 1 hertz velocity type seismometer and responds to earth motion. And so we simply house it in a plastic tube, a PVC tube like this, for protection from the elements. It puts out a very, very low level signal, normally, in the microvolts. So we have a preamplifier unit and an FM a modulator. And what we do is we put the analog voltage from the seismometer, amplify it and put it on an FM carrier. And once it's on an FM carrier, then we can send it by radio or by phone line back to Menlo Park. Most of our systems require about at least an annual visit for recalibration, replacement of batteries. Some of the units use batteries that are self-contained, and routine maintenance. And we have up here, we have roughly 300 seismic sites in Northern California. The seismometer works, as I said, as a velocity type instrument. It's composed of 3 basic elements: the spring, the frame, and the mass. The mass is suspended on a spring and around the frame. And technically, when you calibrate one of these instruments, you move the mass up and down. That induces a voltage in the coil on the spring. Well, the opposite takes place in the field. The frame moves, and the mass remains stable on the spring. So as the frame moves up and down past the coil, it also induces a like voltage, and that's how the seismic voltage is produced. And it's a very simple instrument, and it's very hardy. We seldom, these are put in the field, and in many cases stay out 8 to 10 years without replacement.
The signals coming off the discriminators are fed out to a variety of different recording and processing devices. One of the recording devices is the old standby helicorders, which gives you an immediate visual record of what's happening. And what we have here are 13 helicorders connected to seismometers in 13 different locations throughout Northern California. This is just the recording mechanism here. There's a lot of processors too, the real-time processors, computers that take these signals in and actually detect when an earthquake occurs, record the arrivals, go ahead and process it, and give a location within 2 or 3 minutes of the earthquake occurring.
Yeah. And then one up by Daly City, or?
I think from my perspective, the major importance of this earthquake is that it will really, it will greatly strengthen the approach that we've taken over the last 10 years of dividing the fault into discrete segments, assigning probabilities to each one, and possibly then going ahead and focusing our prediction efforts down on whatever seems like the most probable segment.
The Loma Prieta earthquake really confirmed and told us that we were on the right track in making these probability statements. Part of the underlying principles that were used in this probability study were the segmentation, that the fault does not break, and it's a 800-plus mile long fault, but it's broken into segments that behave very differently. And we know that overall there is this gradual motion of about 2 inches per year overall, but how it is divided up in terms of the release of earthquakes is something that was also confirmed by this earthquake. In other words, we think we're on the right track in both our estimate of probabilities and in our long-term goal of earthquake prediction.
I think one very important thing about the Loma Prieta earthquake is that while we're learning a lot in detail and studying this earthquake, there have been no major new surprises. This earthquake was expected to occur. The effects of this earthquake were expected when an earthquake of this type occurred. And so this earthquake has tended to verify many of the ideas and techniques that we've been developing over the last several decades. In 1906, there was a strong move in the city, apparently, to deny that the earthquake was a major problem, that they wanted to prove to the world that San Francisco could survive an earthquake and the people should continue to move to San Francisco. And so apparently there's historic records now that are showing there was an effort to cover up the damage of the earthquake. So I think in this environment it was only natural that people would go ahead without learning the lessons of the 1906 earthquake. I hope that now we're in a situation where people recognize that we should be able to do a lot better than that we can forecast where the damage is going to be, where the most hazardous areas of our community are.
One accepts some risk of natural disasters. We live in earthquake country, and we know it. We've known it for a long time. The risk is really very small. If you look at it in one way, the chances of your dying in an earthquake by living in California or Alaska or Hawaii are so much smaller than your risk of dying on the highway every day. It's probably smaller than living in hurricane country or tornado country, or where you get ice storms that add to the casualties on the highway. So we do know that we can live very satisfactorily in earthquake country. I like to make the point that the safest place you can be is at home in your single-family frame dwelling or in modern apartments of modern construction. They're very safe, and your chance of dying are very, very small. So I say let's enjoy the benefits of California and our earthquake-prone areas around the Pacific Rim and accept the risk. Not everyone wants to, but I accept it myself.
As you leave the stadium, in an orderly fashion, we ask that you turn your radios on.
We're getting so many reports of so much damage in every direction that we're giving you what we have as we get it. Yes, we did. As we drove in the car, as I said, it first of all felt like a very bad blowout, a flat tire. And then all three of us in the vehicle noticed that there were pieces, crumblings coming from the top of the bridge. And one man described it as being in the twilight zone and just not having any sense of reality. It was all so bizarre, all so frightening and scary.
There it is, Gary, there it is.
What a shot. You're here already.
The earthquake hit at 5 after 5. It, the epicenter, I'm being told now, was in Hollister. Major, major damage.
The Loma Prieta earthquake struck the San Francisco Bay Area at 5:04 p.m. on October 17, 1989. The Richter magnitude was 7.1, making it the most powerful earthquake to occur in the Bay Area since the San Francisco earthquake of 1906. Damage exceeded $6 billion. 62 people lost their lives as a result of the quake. The earthquake was located a few miles west of Loma Prieta Mountain on the Santa Cruz Mountain segment of the San Andreas Fault. The hypocenter occurred at a depth of 11.5 miles below the Earth's surface. The seaside city of Santa Cruz was the nearest sizable city to the quake's epicenter, located 9 miles to the northwest. Heavy damage and several deaths occurred here. Damage was also extensive in the numerous cities along Monterey Bay and in the Santa Cruz Mountains. This program documents the Loma Prieta earthquake and its aftermath. Most of the footage was filmed within minutes to a few weeks of the quake.
got to start feeding some, okay? Lawrence. Hope everybody I know is. I hope you're still standing. Stubbs will get you guys done.
But there were two key plays early in that one as well.
You can see power lines are swaying.